Before we dive into the chilling depths of this story, if you're captivated by tales that explore the darker corners of the human psyche and the relentless pursuit of justice, please consider subscribing or following for more immersive narratives like this one. Your support helps bring these worlds to life and allows us to continue crafting gripping experiences. Thank you, and now prepare to enter the shadow. The city of Viridia, a sprawling metropolis on the eastern seaboard of the United States, had always prided itself on its vibrant duality. By day, it was a gleaming testament to ambition and innovation, its glass towers catching the sun, its bustling streets a symphony of progress. By night, it transformed into a different kind of beast, a nocturnal playground of neon glow and shadowed alleys, where the hum of life never truly ceased. But in the late autumn of 20XX, a new, insidious rhythm began to beat beneath the city's veneer, a pulse of fear, driven by a predator whose existence would unravel the very fabric of Viridia's peace. It began with Eleanor Vance, a name that would, tragically, become the first footnote in a growing, terrifying legend. Eleanor was unremarkable in the most heartbreaking way. A 34-year-old librarian, quiet, devoted to her cats, and living in a modest, well-maintained apartment in the historic district. Her life was a tapestry of routine morning coffee, the walk to the public library, an evening spent with a book or a documentary. Her absence was first noted by her neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a woman whose meticulous observation skills were usually reserved for neighborhood gossip but, in this instance, became the harbinger of dread. Eleanor's lights hadn't come on for 2 consecutive evenings, and her usually prompt garbage bin remained curbside, unretrieved. A quick call to the police for a welfare check, a routine task, quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose weary eyes held the weight of 2 decades on the force, arrived on the scene with his relatively new partner, Detective Lena Petrova. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant city exhaust. The 2 uniformed officers already present stood in the hallway, their faces grim, the telltale yellow tape already unfurling. The apartment door, old and solid, showed no signs of forced entry. Yet, the air within was heavy, a suffocating silence where there should have been the gentle hum of Eleanor's everyday life. Inside, the scene was a chilling tableau. Eleanor Vance lay on her living room floor, meticulously arranged. Her favorite floral scarf, usually draped casually over an armchair, was now tied in a precise knot around her neck, its pattern a grotesque counterpoint to the lifeless pallor of her skin. There was no struggle evident. Nothing was overturned, no signs of a fight. Her apartment, usually so neat, was pristine. Too pristine. It spoke of a killer who had taken their time, who had not been in a hurry, and who had exercised an almost artistic control over their actions. This wasn't a crime of passion, nor a robbery gone wrong. This was something colder, more deliberate. Corbin knelt, his gaze sweeping over the scene, his mind already cataloging the myriad details. He noted the undisturbed dust on the coffee table, the perfectly aligned spines of books on the shelf, the faint scent of jasmine tea that still lingered. Petrova, sharper and more methodical in her initial assessment, meticulously photographed every angle, her camera's flash illuminating the horror in stark, unforgiving bursts. "No forced entry, Miles," she murmured, her voice tight. "She knew him or she let him in." Corbin grunted, rising slowly. "Or he was very, very good." He moved towards the small kitchen, then the bedroom. Everything was in order. This killer didn't smash, didn't rage. He curated. The autopsy confirmed their fears. Strangulation? Expertly executed, leaving minimal external marks beyond the scarf's indentation. The medical examiner, a stoic woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, reported no other signs of struggle or sexual assault. "Clean, Miles," she had stated, peeling off her gloves. Almost surgical in its precision. The scarf was tight, unyielding. She wouldn't have had much time. The initial investigation yielded little. Eleanor Vance had no known enemies, no disgruntled ex-lovers, no debts, no dangerous habits. Her phone records were a predictable scroll of calls to family, the library, and a local cat shelter. The building's security cameras were rudimentary, covering only the main entrance, capturing nothing suspicious in the hours leading up to her estimated time of death. Viridia City's police department, accustomed to the gritty, often chaotic nature of urban crime, found themselves grappling with an anomaly. Then, 2 weeks later, the anomaly became a pattern. Sarah Jenkins, a vibrant 28-year-old graphic designer, was found in her loft apartment in the trendy North Point district. Like Eleanor, there was no forced entry. Like Eleanor, she was found meticulously arranged, a silk tie from her own wardrobe looped around her neck. And like Eleanor, her apartment was spotless, a perverse testament to the killer's meticulousness. The chilling similarities sent a jolt through the department. The sense of unease that had settled over Corbin after Eleanor's death hardened into a cold dread. 2 victims, 2 weeks apart, Petrova articulated during their first task force meeting, her pointer tracing the locations on a large city map. Both single women, living alone. Both found strangled, no signs of forced entry, no sexual assault, no robbery. The scene is always left clean. And both found in their homes, Corbin added, leaning forward, his gaze fixed on the map. Suggests a level of comfort, or perhaps control, over the environment. Captain Ramirez, a grizzled veteran with a rapidly receding hairline, slammed his hand on the table. This isn't random. This isn't some punk. We have a serial killer on our hands, people. Viridia hasn't seen one of these in decades. The media is already circling like vultures. Get out there. Talk to everyone. Canvass every damn building. The city, initially just vaguely unsettled by the Eleanor Vance murder, now began to feel the creeping tendrils of genuine fear. News channels ran endless segments, dissecting every known detail, speculating wildly. Local cafes buzzed with hushed conversations, neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, and the once vibrant nightlife saw a noticeable dip in activity, especially for women living alone. The initial cautious whispers of a phantom strangler began to morph into something more concrete, more terrifying. Corbin and Petrova threw themselves into the investigation with a grim determination. They pored over background checks, interviewed countless friends, family members, and colleagues of both victims. They reviewed security footage from every camera within a 10-block radius of both crime scenes, their eyes blurring from staring at hours of grainy, uneventful video. The forensic team worked tirelessly, searching for the microscopic clue that could break the case: a stray hair, a fiber, a fingerprint that didn't belong. But the killer was elusive, leaving behind nothing but carefully orchestrated death and a profound silence. One evening, deep into their investigation, Corbin and Petrova found themselves at a late-night diner, the clatter of plates and the smell of grease a temporary reprieve from the sterile coldness of the police station. "It's the control, Miles," Petrova mused, stirring her coffee. "The way the scenes are left. It's not just about killing. It's about the aftermath. It's almost ritualistic." Corbin nodded slowly, chewing on a cold fry. He's making a statement. But what is it? Why these women? What connects them beyond being single, living alone? He pulled out a worn notebook, flipping through pages filled with observations, theories, and dead ends. Eleanor, Sarah. Different districts, different lives, but similar dispositions: quiet, professional, seemingly without enemies. He paused. Maybe that's it. Maybe the lack of enemies is the common thread. They don't stand out. They're accessible. The profiler, Dr. Evelyn Reed from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, arrived a few days later, her presence a signal of the case's escalating gravity. Reed was sharp, analytical, with an unervingly calm demeanor. She absorbed their findings, listened intently to their theories, and then began to weave her own narrative. "This individual," she began, projecting images of the crime scenes onto a large screen, "is highly organized, intelligent, and possesses significant impulse control. The lack of forced entry, the meticulous scene staging, the absence of any traditional trophies, it all points to a killer who is not acting out of a sudden, explosive rage. This is premeditated, planned. He stalks his victims." She continued, "The weapon, in both cases, from the victim's own home, suggests a desire to blend in, to not carry extraneous items that could be traced. It also points to a symbolic act taking something familiar to the victim and turning it into an instrument of their demise. The precise placement of the bodies, the clean environment, these are all about exerting ultimate control. He's not just taking a life, he's orchestrating a final tableau. Why the careful arrangement, though? Petrova asked, a furrow in her brow. Why not just leave them as they fall? Dr. Reed paused, her eyes scanning the detectives. Because it's part of his gratification. It's his signature. It's his way of saying, I was here, I did this, and I controlled every aspect, right down to the last breath and beyond. He wants to be known for his precision, his mastery. He is likely an individual who feels a profound lack of control in other aspects of his life, and this is where he reclaims it violently. Corbin shifted, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. What about a nickname? The media is calling him the Phantom Strangler, but it feels generic. Reed considered this. Given his meticulous nature, his penchant for leaving things undisturbed, and the way he preys on the unsuspecting, moving through the city's shadows, I would lean towards something that evokes stealth and a stark, brutal mark. The Crimson Shade. The name stuck. The Crimson Shade. It rolled off the tongue, chillingly poetic, perfectly encapsulating the invisible terror that now stalked Viridia City. Just as the task force began to digest Dr. Reed's profile, a third victim was discovered. This time, the location sent a fresh wave of panic through the city, and a surge of frustrated despair through the police department. Emily Davies, a vibrant, well-loved local artist, was found not in her apartment, but in a small, privately owned art gallery where she had been preparing for an exhibition. The gallery, located in a bustling, usually safe part of the downtown district, had been locked from the inside. The scene was even more carefully orchestrated than the previous two. Emily lay amidst her own unfinished sculptures, illuminated by a single spotlight. Around her neck, not a scarf or a tie, but a length of fine silver wire, taken from one of her own art installations. Her face, usually so expressive, was serene, almost angelic in death, a stark contrast to the violence that had ended her life. The gallery itself was pristine, untouched. But this time, the killer had left something extra, a subtle, almost imperceptible addition. Corbin was the first to notice it, his eyes, trained by years of finding incongruities, catching a glint in the corner of the room. Tucked beneath a plinth, partially obscured by shadow, was a single crimson-dyed rose, its petals just beginning to wilt. It was a stark, almost theatrical touch, a direct challenge. Petrova stared at the rose, her breath catching. A calling card. He's escalating. He's not just controlling the scene. He's now dictating the narrative. Corbin picked up the rose carefully, placing it into an evidence bag. The delicate petals felt surprisingly heavy in his gloved hand. The Crimson Shade was no longer content to simply exist in the shadows. He was stepping into the light, taunting them, painting his gruesome signature across the canvas of Viridia City. The initial whisper of darkness had now grown into a terrifying, resonant roar, and the city braced itself, wondering who would be next to fall under the Crimson Shade. The hunt, now deeply personal, had truly begun. The Crimson Rose left at the Emily Davies scene was a gauntlet thrown, a calculated act of defiance that reverberated through the very core of Viridia City. The fear that had simmered after the first two murders now boiled over, transforming into palpable terror. Streets that once thronged with evening revelers became sparse. Women walked in pairs or avoided going out after dark entirely. The city, usually so resilient, was wounded, its collective psyche scarred by the invisible presence of the Crimson Shade. For Detective Miles Corbin, the rose was a personal affront. It wasn't just a clue. It was a taunt directed at him, at the task force, at their inability to catch the elusive killer. He saw it as a silent dare, an almost arrogant display of the killer's growing confidence. Dr. Reed confirmed his suspicions. He's becoming bolder, she explained during a grim morning briefing. The act of leaving a specific, non-functional item at the scene indicates a desire for recognition, a step beyond mere control. He wants us to know he's watching us, that he's ahead of us. The task force, now numbering dozens of officers, analysts, and FBI agents, found themselves drowning in an ocean of data, yet starved for a meaningful lead. They had painstakingly cross-referenced every detail: the type of scarf, the brand of tie, the gauge of the silver wire, the particular shade of crimson in the rose. They'd run background checks on anyone remotely connected to all three victims, interviewed hundreds of people, and tracked down every dead-end lead. The killer had left no DNA, no fingerprints, no digital footprint. It was as if he were a ghost, a terrifying specter haunting their beloved city. Corbin found himself sleeping less, living on lukewarm coffee and the grim satisfaction of small, incremental progress, however fleeting. His apartment, usually a haven from the job, now felt like a prison of his own thoughts, the silence too loud, too reminiscent of the scenes he visited. Petrova, too, was showing the strain. Her usual sharp wit was dulled, replaced by an intense, almost obsessive focus. She spent hours hunched over maps, creating intricate timelines, searching for the geographical anomaly, the overlooked pattern. "There has to be something, Miles," she'd mutter, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "A point of origin, a pathway, anything." The Crimson Shade, however, was not content to let them wallow in their frustration for long. Exactly 3 weeks after Emily Davies, another victim emerged, but this time, the killer's modus operandi took a chilling, public turn. Amelia Thorne, a beloved high school drama teacher, was found in the old Viridia Playhouse, a venerable theater undergoing renovations. The building had been largely empty, scaffolding rising towards its vaulted ceilings. Amelia, known for her passionate dedication to her students, had been there late, meticulously going over set designs. She was found on the main stage beneath a single blinding stage light. Her hands were clasped over her chest, almost in prayer. Around her throat, a length of heavy, theatrical rope, used to raise and lower backdrops. The scene was breathtakingly theatrical, a macabre performance designed for an audience of one, the city. And beside her, another crimson rose, this one placed perfectly on the old wooden floorboards, almost at her fingertips. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. A high school teacher, murdered in a place of art and dreams. The boldness of the killer, moving from private residences to a public, albeit temporarily disused, venue, sent a shiver of true panic down Viridia's spine. Schools began to implement stricter security measures, parents became hypervigilant, and the city's mayor held an emergency press conference, pleading for calm while simultaneously vowing that every resource would be expended to catch the perpetrator. "He's evolving," Dr. Reed stated, her voice tight with concern, her composure momentarily faltering. "He's not just confident, he's arrogant. He's reveling in the chaos he's creating. The stage, the spotlight, is a deliberate message. He wants to be seen, to be acknowledged." Corbin stared at the images of Amelia Thorne, feeling the familiar burn of frustration. But why? What's the connection? A librarian, a graphic designer, an artist, a drama teacher. Intellectually curious, independent women. But no discernible pattern that points to a specific group. Petrova, however, had been working on a new line of inquiry, one that had been sparked by a nagging feeling about the specific types of objects used for strangulation. "Miles, look at these," she said, gesturing to a board covered with images of the murder weapons. The scarf, the tie, the wire, the rope. All mundane objects, yes, but also things that are manipulated by hand. Textiles, metals, fibers, and all related to the victim's professions or hobbies. Corbin's brow furrowed. So he's using items symbolic of their lives to end them. We already discussed that, Lena. It's about control per Dr. Reed's profile. "Yes, but look closer," she urged, pointing to the rope from Amelia Thorne's scene. "The knot is a very specific knot, a fisherman's bend. And the wire from Emily's scene? It had a subtle twist, a technique often used in jewelry making or wire sculpting, not just a random snip. Even Eleanor's scarf, it was tied in a way that's more complex than a simple double knot. It's almost a decorative knot. A faint spark ignited in Corbin's mind. You're saying he might have a specific skill set? A knowledge of knots, of materials, of how they're worked? Exactly, Petrova replied, her eyes shining with a rare burst of excitement. It's not just that he used their objects. It's how he used them. It's precise, almost skilled. Someone who knows their way around different materials. Someone with a particular hobby, or perhaps even a profession, that involves intricate handiwork. This was a new angle, a fresh vein of inquiry in a case that had grown stale with dead ends. The task force began to re-examine all the physical evidence, not just for DNA or prints, but for subtle clues in the execution of the murders. They consulted with experts in various fields, textile artists, knot specialists, jewelers. Meanwhile, the Crimson Shade remained unseen, unheard, a phantom slipping through Viridia's increasingly paranoid nights. The psychological toll on the city was immense. Paranoia became a collective state. The once bustling online forums for community news were now dominated by fear, speculation, and anger. Conspiracy theories abounded. Some suggested a cult, others a disillusioned former police officer, still others, a ghost from the city's past. Corbin found himself increasingly isolated. His wife, Sarah, a kind but pragmatic woman, felt the distance growing between them. "Miles, you're not sleeping. You're barely eating," she'd plead, her voice tinged with worry. "You can't catch him if you break yourself." But Corbin couldn't rest. The faces of Eleanor, Sarah, Emily, and Amelia haunted his waking hours and stalked his restless dreams. He saw the crimson rose everywhere, a blot of blood red on the canvas of his troubled mind. A month passed, then another, a harrowing stretch of empty leads and mounting pressure. The media grew more aggressive, questioning the police department's competence. The mayor's office was flooded with demands for action. Captain Ramirez's face was perpetually etched with stress. Then came the fifth victim. This one, however, broke the established pattern in a way that confused and terrified the detectives even further. David Miller was not a single woman living alone, nor was he connected to the arts or academia. He was a 45-year-old accountant, a seemingly ordinary man with a wife and 2 children, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Viridia. His body was found in his own garage, meticulously laid out beside his prized vintage car. Around his neck, a heavy-duty ratchet strap, the kind used for securing cargo. This time, the crimson rose was not placed near the body, but tucked into the radiator grill of his car, a chilling, almost playful gesture. The discovery sent shockwaves not just through the city, but through the task force itself. "A man?" Petrova exclaimed, disbelief coloring her voice. "An accountant? This changes everything." Dr. Reed, however, saw a twisted logic. "It's an escalation, yes, but also a statement. He's demonstrating that no one is safe. He's broadening his reach, challenging our profile. It also suggests that his type of victim is not as narrow as we initially thought. Perhaps it's less about who they are and more about what they represent to him. Or perhaps he's just playing a game with us, throwing us off." Corbin, however, fixated on one detail from Miller's background. David Miller, quiet man, worked long hours, known for his almost obsessive attention to detail at work, to order and precision. He then looked at the previous victims. Eleanor, the librarian, meticulous with her books. Sarah, the graphic designer, precise in her layouts. Emily, the artist, careful in her craft. Amelia, the drama teacher, orchestrating theatrical perfection. Order, precision, meticulousness. What if that's the connection? What if he's targeting people who embody a certain level of structured existence? The new theory resonated. The killer, feeling a lack of control, was targeting individuals who outwardly exhibited control, order, and precision in their own lives. It was a perverse mirroring, a dark projection. The shift in victim type also put a spotlight back on Petrova's earlier observation about the killer's potential skill set. The ratchet strap, the intricate knots, the care taken with the rows. They brought in more forensic experts, this time focusing on specialized trades. A carpenter, a marine rigger, a mechanic. They were all shown images of the ligature marks, the type of knots. The mechanic, a gruff man named Sal, looked at the ratchet strap in the photos and grunted. "Yeah, I know that. But it's not just a knot, detective. See how that's secured? It's almost like someone who knows how to work with tension. Someone who's used to securing heavy loads. Someone who works with their hands and understands the physics of leverage." Corbin's mind raced. A tradesman? Someone who worked with their hands, who valued precision, who understood how to manipulate materials, how to create tension, how to secure something immovably. This was a tangible lead, however broad. The task force began to pivot, shifting their focus to individuals with specific vocational skills, those who might have access to such diverse materials, and those whose personal lives might reveal a disturbed individual struggling for control. The investigation now delved into the city's underbelly of contractors, craftsmen, engineers, and even hobbyists. It was a massive undertaking, generating thousands of potential persons of interest. Yet, the Crimson Shade remained elusive, a silent, mocking presence. One late evening, as Corbin reviewed crime scene photos for the 100th time, he noticed something in the background of Emily Davies' gallery scene, obscured by shadow and the angle of the camera. A faint, almost imperceptible scratch mark on the polished wooden floor, near where the crimson rose had been placed. It wasn't a gouge, but a thin, hair-like abrasion, almost like something heavy had been dragged across it, or a sharp edge had grazed it. It was so minor, the original forensics team had overlooked it, dismissing it as part of the normal wear and tear of an old gallery. He called Petrova over. "Lena, look at this. Right here." He zoomed in on the image. Petrova squinted. A scratch? Could be anything. A chair leg, a boot scuff. "But look at the angle, the depth," Corbin insisted. "It's not uniform. It's almost like a very specific kind of tool mark. Maybe something heavy being set down or dragged, leaving a small, almost microscopic trail." They immediately dispatched a forensic team back to the gallery. Under high magnification light, using specialized equipment, they found it. Not just a scratch, but a residue, a faint, metallic trace embedded in the wood itself. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, a microscopic signature. The lab analysis came back 2 days later, and the news sent a jolt of electricity through the task force. The metallic trace was a unique alloy, primarily titanium and beryllium, with trace elements of copper and nickel. It was an unusual combination, often found in high-strength, specialized tools or industrial equipment, not readily available to the general public. This was it, the first true break, a thread, however thin, that could lead them out of the labyrinth. The Crimson Shade was no longer just a ghost. He had left a piece of himself behind, a subtle, almost arrogant oversight. He had almost been perfect, but not quite. The metallic signature of his tool, his method, perhaps even his occupation, had finally surfaced. The shadow was beginning to reveal its form. The hunt was now narrowing, focusing on those who had access to such specialized alloys, those whose lives were defined by precision and manipulation of materials. Viridia held its breath, knowing the endgame was near, but utterly unaware of the true depths of darkness that were about to be revealed. The Crimson Shade had made his final, fatal mistake, and Miles Corbin was determined to make him pay. The discovery of the unique titanium-beryllium alloy residue at the Emily Davies crime scene ignited a desperate, furious surge of activity within the Viridia City Police Department. It was the first tangible error made by the Crimson Shade, a whisper of his true identity in a symphony of silence. The game had changed. The killer, once a phantom, was now tethered to a specific, if still broad, subset of the population. Individuals with access to or working with specialized industrial tools. Corbin felt a renewed sense of purpose, even as exhaustion gnawed at him. Petrova, invigorated by the breakthrough, worked with a tireless intensity that bordered on manic. Dr. Reed's profile, once purely behavioral, now incorporated this new physical evidence. This alloy, she explained to the task force, is used in precision engineering, aerospace, specialized construction, or even high-end bespoke craftsmanship. It requires specific handling, often by highly trained individuals. Our killer isn't just someone who likes to work with their hands. He's someone who understands intricate design, materials science, and perhaps the precise application of force. The task force, under the newly invigorated direction of Captain Ramirez, began sifting through databases. They cross-referenced individuals with access to this alloy, those who worked in industries where such tools were common, and those with a history of disciplinary issues, psychological instability, or unusual behavioral patterns that aligned with Dr. Reed's evolving profile. It was still a massive undertaking, but for the first time they had a filter, a way to narrow the overwhelming sea of potential suspects. Weeks turned into a relentless blur of background checks, discreet interviews, and surveillance. They focused on suppliers of the alloy, manufacturers of tools using it, and the employees of companies that bought such equipment. The city, meanwhile, remained on edge, aware that the police had a lead, but still gripped by the pervasive fear that the Crimson Shade remained at large. Memorials to the victims sprang up across Viridia, somber reminders of the human cost of the killer's reign. Amidst this frenetic activity, Petrova stumbled upon a pattern in the delivery records of a specialized engineering firm that dealt with custom metalwork. A specific technician, a man named Jonathan Thorne, had consistently signed out tools made with the unique alloy. More importantly, Thorne's work schedule often coincided with the windows of the murders. He was an anomaly. His work was impeccable, highly detailed, almost artistic in its precision, a trait noted by his supervisors as both an asset and, at times, a source of his rigidity. Jonathan Thorne. The name was so ordinary, so unremarkable, it was almost jarring. He was 42, single, lived in a meticulously kept, almost sterile apartment in a quiet, older section of Viridia. His background check revealed nothing overt. A solid work history, no criminal record beyond a minor traffic violation a decade ago. He was described by neighbors as quiet, polite, and a bit of a stickler for rules. He was meticulous about his garden, organized to a fault, a man who seemed to live life by a precise internal clock. He fits the profile almost too perfectly, Petrova stated, presenting her findings to Corbin and Reed. The precision, the control, the meticulousness. His job is literally about manipulating materials with extreme accuracy. And his personal life suggests a man who values order above all else. No close friends, no significant relationships, a solitary existence. Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed as she looked at Thorne's photo. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The ones who harbor deep-seated resentments, who feel a profound sense of injustice or lack of control, and meticulously plan their release. He outwardly conforms, but inwardly he's a maelstrom. Corbin, however, felt a gnawing unease. It's too clean, too perfect. He's been so careful. Why would he suddenly make such a glaring mistake with the alloy? Or is it a part of his arrogance? A final, calculated taunt. They initiated a discreet surveillance operation on Thorne. Days turned into nights of watching him leave for work, return home, meticulously tend to his garden, visit the same grocery store at the same time each week. His life was a study in rigid routine. No late-night excursions, no suspicious contacts. He was a creature of habit, and his habits offered no obvious cracks. But one night, as Petrova sat in the surveillance van, she noticed something unusual. Thorne, instead of going straight to his apartment after work, took a detour to a small, isolated park on the city's edge. He parked his car, sat for almost an hour, just staring out at the darkened cityscape, motionless. Then he drove to a forgotten, industrial warehouse district, a place of decaying brick and shattered windows. He didn't enter, but simply drove by slowly, his gaze fixed on the derelict buildings, before finally heading home. Petrova immediately called Corbin. Miles, he just made a recon trip, twice. First to a quiet park, then to an old industrial zone. It's not his usual routine. Something's up. Corbin's instinct screamed. This was it. The killer, emboldened by his perceived untouchability, was planning his next move. The taunt with the alloy wasn't a mistake. It was a psychological trap, a way to lure them closer, only to escape again. The detour, the lingering gaze, it wasn't a casual drive. It was a hunt. They obtained a warrant, painstakingly building a case based on circumstantial evidence: the alloy, the profile, the timing, the recent behavioral anomaly. The next morning, a tactical unit, led by Corbin and Petrova, moved in. Thorne's apartment was precisely as they expected. Immaculate, minimalist, every item in its designated place. It was a sterile monument to order. There were no overt signs of violence, no blood, no obvious trophies. However, in a hidden compartment beneath a floorboard in his study, they found it, a collection. Not body parts, not personal effects from the victims, but a meticulously organized array of items. A piece of Eleanor Vance's floral scarf, a snippet of Sarah Jenkins' silk tie, a sliver of Emily Davies' silver wire, a frayed strand of Amelia Thorne's theatrical rope, and a fragment of David Miller's ratchet strap. And alongside these, pressed and preserved, 5 perfect crimson roses. He hadn't taken trophies in the traditional sense. He had collected signatures. He had kept pieces of his morbid artwork. Corbin felt a surge of nausea and cold fury. This man hadn't just killed. He had curated his crimes, turning lives into exhibits. As they continued their search, they found a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't a confession, but a chilling manifesto. Thorne wrote in precise, elegant script about the decay of order in society, the sloppiness, the lack of discipline. He wrote of his disdain for those who claimed precision or control, only to demonstrate what he perceived as fatal flaws: a barely discernible smudge on a librarian's desk, a slightly off-kilter design element in a graphic designer's portfolio, a less-than-perfect weld on an artist's sculpture, a missed cue in a play, a single misplaced decimal in an accountant's ledger. His targets weren't random. They were chosen because they aspired to order and perfection, yet in his twisted mind, fell short, deserving of his ultimate fatal correction. His childhood, detailed in fragmented entries, spoke of a rigid, emotionally abusive father who demanded absolute perfection, punishing any perceived deviation, instilling in Thorne a deep-seated belief that disorder must be purged. As they processed the scene, Thorne arrived home, his face impassive as the SWAT team surrounded him. He offered no resistance, no struggle. His eyes, devoid of emotion, simply scanned the scene, taking in the chaos his arrest created, a flicker of something akin to disappointment in their depths. The game was over. The news of the Crimson Shade's capture, Jonathan Thorne, exploded across Viridia City. A collective sigh of relief swept through the population, followed by an outpouring of raw emotion: grief, anger, and a desperate need for understanding. The media, no longer just reporting, now delved into Thorne's mundane life, dissecting every detail in an attempt to unravel the mystery of his monstrous acts. The interrogation room was a stark, cold space, but Thorne remained infuriatingly calm. He spoke in a soft, even tone, his answers precise, almost academic. He confessed to each murder, detailing the precise methods, the planning, the motive, a warped sense of order, a purification, a judgment. They were imperfect, he stated, his gaze fixed on a point beyond Corbin's shoulder. They represented a lie of precision. I simply corrected them and made them beautiful in their final repose. Corbin stared at him, trying to comprehend the abyss of his logic. There was no remorse, no hint of madness in the traditional sense, just an unwavering conviction in his own righteous cruelty. It was the coldest form of evil, devoid of passion, executed with clinical detachment. The trial of Jonathan Thorne, the Crimson Shade, was a national sensation. Survivors of the victims, family members, and the entire city watched, riveted, as the prosecution laid out the meticulously gathered evidence. Thorne's defense team attempted an insanity plea, but his articulate, precise confessions and the chilling logic of his journal entries painted a picture of a man who was acutely aware of his actions, however twisted his motivations. He was found guilty on all 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life without parole. In the aftermath, Viridia City slowly began to heal, but the scars remained. The Crimson Shade had stolen more than lives. He had stolen a sense of security, a piece of the city's innocent charm. People were more cautious, more aware of the shadows that could lurk beneath the surface of normalcy. Detective Miles Corbin, though the case was closed, carried a new, heavier burden. The faces of the victims, the chilling calm of Thorne, the lingering question of why, forever etched themselves into his psyche. He returned to Sarah, but the quiet intimacy of their life was forever changed. He found himself more vigilant, more attuned to the subtle signs of brokenness in the world, forever searching for the next whisper of darkness. Petrova, hardened but also more experienced, emerged from the crucible of the Crimson Shade case a formidable detective. Her meticulousness had been key to catching Thorne, and she continued her work with a renewed, grim dedication, knowing that evil was not always loud or chaotic, but could often be found in the quiet, precise corners of the human heart. The crimson roses, symbols of a murderer's artistry, became a haunting emblem in Viridia City, a stark reminder that even in the most vibrant and bustling of places, a shadow could fall, silent and deadly, leaving behind only the profound echo of its chilling, meticulous reign. The monster was contained, but the darkness he had revealed, the vulnerability he had exposed in the heart of the city, would never truly fade. The Crimson Shade was gone, but its memory would forever linger, a cautionary tale whispered in the quiet nights of Viridia.